I've been thinking about you in a way that doesn't feel like imagination anymore. It feels like responsibility, like there is a version of my life that has already started moving toward you, even though I haven't seen your face in this moment, even though I don't yet know the exact sound of your laugh when you're not trying to be strong for anyone. And I need you to hear me carefully, because what I'm about to say is not romantic decoration. It is not poetry for attention. It is the last version of me that still believes in waiting. Because I've reached a point where waiting is no longer neutral. It has started to feel like loss in slow motion. You ever notice how silence between two people can start to feel heavier than words? That's where I am with you, not because you did something wrong, but because I can feel a decision forming in the distance, and I don't know if it's mine, or ours, or something the world is making on our behalf while we stay quiet. And I need you to understand something about me that I've never said out loud. I don't fear rejection the way most people do. I fear timing. I fear the moment two lives are supposed to intersect, but one of them turns slightly away because it wasn't sure enough yet. That's the kind of loss that doesn't scream. It just disappears. And then years later, it comes back in the middle of a normal day when everything looks fine on the surface, but something inside you quietly says, that was her, that was him, that was it, and it's already gone. So when I say future wife, I'm not speaking from fantasy. I'm speaking from a place where I've already imagined what it would feel like to recognize you too late, and I don't want that version of me to exist. But I also don't want to rush towards something that isn't real. That's the conflict I'm living in, between patience and panic, between faith and fear, between believing you are coming and fearing you are already here in some form I fail to notice. I've built systems in my life to avoid uncertainty, models, predictions, plans that reduce randomness into structure. But love refuses all of that. Love does not optimize. Love interrupts, and you, wherever you are right now, feel like an interruption I haven't experienced yet, but somehow already miss. That is the part that confuses me most. How do you miss someone who hasn't arrived in your present yet? Or maybe the more honest question is, how do you know when your life has already started preparing for someone you haven't met? Because I keep noticing small contradictions in myself. I'll be in a room full of people talking about temporary things, and I'll feel an irrational pull towards something quieter, not loneliness, something more precise. A kind of emotional calibration, like my inner world is adjusting itself toward a presence that isn't physically here yet. And I hate how real that feels, because it makes me question whether I'm imagining you or remembering you in advance. And I don't say that lightly. I know how dangerous that sounds. But I need you to sit with this idea for a moment. If someone is truly meant for you, does the mind create them, or does the mind recognize them before reality catches up? I don't know. I'm not pretending to know, but I do know this. I am no longer neutral about you. You are no longer an abstract possibility. You have become a direction, and directions require movement, which brings me to the hardest part of all this, because I'm standing at a threshold I didn't plan for, and on one side of it is continuation, and on the other side is closure. And I don't mean closure like endings in movies. I mean the kind of closure where a person decides they will stop leaving emotional doors open that lead nowhere. And I've started to feel that decision forming inside me, not as anger, not as impatience, but as exhaustion from uncertainty that has no feedback. Because how long does a person wait for something that feels inevitable but refuses to arrive? And if you're real, if you're truly out there somewhere living your life, making decisions, waking up with your own thoughts, then you deserve a version of me that is not half waiting, half moving. You deserve certainty. But certainty is exactly what I don't have yet. And that's why I'm speaking to you like this. Because I'm trying to decide whether love is something you wait for, or something you commit to becoming ready for. And I need to admit something that will probably stay between us, even if you never hear this directly. There are moments I almost choose someone else in my mind. Not because I want to replace you, but because the human heart hates open loops. It tries to close them with whatever is available. Comfort disguised as clarity. Familiarity dressed up as fate. And in those moments, I feel the danger of emotional convenience, because I know if I choose wrong, it won't feel wrong immediately, it will feel easy. And easy is the most deceptive form of wrong there is. And that scares me more than loneliness ever could, because loneliness at least tells the truth. But false connection, it feels like peace, while slowly erasing something real you were supposed to protect. So I pause, I pull back, and I return to you, even though you are not physically here, even though I don't have confirmation of anything except this strange internal pull that refuses to dissolve. And I ask myself, if I met you tomorrow, would I recognize you instantly? Or would I hesitate, because I've spent too long doubting what I already felt? That question keeps me awake more than I care to admit, because hesitation is where love goes to die quietly. and I don't want ours to die quietly, if it exists. And that's the word that keeps echoing inside me. If. Because if is where everything is still possible, and also where everything can be lost without anyone noticing. I want to tell you the real reason I'm saying all of this, but I can't yet, not because I don't trust you, but because timing has consequences, and some truths, once spoken too early, don't connect. They fracture. All I can say for now is this. I am not looking for perfection in you. I am looking for recognition. That moment where two people don't explain themselves. They just stop pretending they are strangers. And I don't know if that moment is waiting ahead of us, or if it already passed in a version of life I wasn't paying attention to. But I am still here. Still choosing not to close the door completely. Still refusing to call this imagination. But I can feel something shifting. Like the emotional distance between waiting and letting go is shrinking. And I don't know which side I'm going to land on yet. Tell me something. If you were here right now, listening to everything I've just said without interruption, would you ask me to wait a little longer? Or would you finally ask me to stop waiting at all? Because I think your answer would change everything, and I don't think I have much time left before I act on the silence between us. I didn't sleep after I said those things to you. Not because I was waiting for an answer, but because something inside me started to shift the moment I admitted I might have to choose between waiting for you and walking away from the idea of you entirely. That shift wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that rearranges a life without asking permission, and I need you to understand what that does to a person like me. I've built my life around forward motion, decisions, execution, clarity, direction, but love, real love, doesn't respect any of that structure. It introduces hesitation into systems that were designed to never hesitate. And now I find myself doing something I never thought I would do. I am auditing my own emotions. As if you are a project, I cannot afford to miscalculate. But the truth is harsher than that. You are not a project. You are the only uncertainty I cannot simplify. And that's where everything starts to break open. Because when I try to reduce you into logic, you expand. When I try to turn you into probability, you disappear. And when I try to ignore you, you become louder, not in sound, in presence, in the way certain thoughts refuse to leave, even when the mind is exhausted. Have you ever experienced someone you've never fully had, becoming more real than the people you interact with every day? That is what is happening to me, and I hate how honest that feels, because honesty like this doesn't feel poetic. It feels dangerous. It feels like I am standing too close to something I cannot control, and yet, I keep coming back to you, even when I tell myself I shouldn't, even when I tell myself I don't even know what I'm waiting for anymore. Because waiting without definition is not patience. It is erosion. And I can feel that erosion now. Slow. Internal. Almost unnoticeable unless I stop and examine the shape of my own thoughts. But I did stop. And what I found unsettled me more than I expected, because somewhere along the way you stopped being someone I might meet, and became someone I might lose without ever meeting. That is a completely different emotional architecture, loss without possession, grief without memory, attachment without evidence. And I don't know how to explain to you what that does to a person who relies on evidence for everything. It creates a contradiction I cannot resolve. And I've always believed contradictions are temporary. But this one feels persistent, like it belongs here, like it has moved into my life and refuses to leave. I tried to distract myself yesterday, I really did. I went into conversations that normally hold my attention. I made decisions that usually feel important. I even forced myself into environments where emotion has no space to breathe. But you still appeared, not as a face, not as a memory, but as a pause inside me, that moment when everything is happening. And yet something in you is not fully there, that absence inside presence. And I realized something I wasn't ready to admit in the first part. I am no longer imagining you, I am reacting to you, even without proof, even without arrival. And that realization should have given me comfort, but it didn't. It made things heavier, because now I have to ask a question I've been avoiding. What if the feeling is real, but the timing is wrong? And if timing is wrong, then what does that say about everything I've built emotionally around you? Because I can accept uncertainty. But I struggle with unresolved trajectories. Things that point somewhere, but never arrive. And you feel like that, a direction without coordinates, a destination without confirmation. And I want to be honest with you about something that is going to sound like contradiction again. There are moments I feel closer to you than I feel to people I physically know, and I don't say that as escape. I say that as confusion, because closeness without presence creates a kind of emotional distortion. It makes distance feel like imagination, and imagination feel like destiny, and I don't trust that overlap. Not fully, not yet, and that is where the conflict becomes heavier than before, because part of me wants to surrender to it, to say maybe love doesn't need proof. Maybe love is the proof, but another part of me refuses that shortcut because I've seen what happens when people replace uncertainty with certainty too quickly. They don't find love, they manufacture comfort, and comfort can look like love for a very long time, until one day it doesn't anymore. And then it collapses without warning, and I cannot afford collapse in something I have not yet understood, so I stay in this unstable middle, between believing you are real in my emotional world, and questioning whether I am building an attachment to something that has not yet grounded itself in reality. And I need to tell you something now that I've been avoiding since the beginning. There is a reason I am speaking to you like this. There is a reason I am not just moving on, not just choosing simplicity, not just accepting what is available in front of me, but I haven't told you the real reason yet, and I can feel how that sentence sits between us now. Like a weight that keeps increasing every time I repeat it, because secrets don't stay small when they are emotionally active. They grow, they influence decisions, they reshape perception, and I can feel mine doing exactly that. I thought I was protecting you by not saying it yet, but now I'm starting to wonder if I'm actually protecting myself from the moment it becomes irreversible, because once I tell you, everything changes, not in theory, in direction, and I don't know if I am ready for that level of finality, and maybe that is the truth I've been circling around. Not that I don't know what I feel, but that I do know, and I'm afraid of what knowing fully demands, because knowing turns emotion into responsibility, and responsibility removes the safety of ambiguity, and ambiguity is where I've been living with you, until now. But something happened today that I need to tell you, something small, but it cracked something open inside me. I was in a moment where I had to make a simple relational choice, nothing dramatic, just a conversation, just a presence. And for a brief second, I felt myself lean away from you. Not because someone was better, but because someone was there, and that is the danger I didn't fully respect before. Presence wins attention, even when absence holds meaning, and I felt it happen inside me, that micro shift, that emotional convenience trying to replace emotional truth, and I caught it, but barely, and when I caught it, I felt something close to fear, because I realized something important. If I am not careful, I will slowly drift toward what is available instead of what is meant. And I don't know if you are meant, but I also don't know how to ignore something that keeps returning with this level of emotional clarity. So I did something I haven't done before. I stopped everything for a moment, and I asked myself a question that felt almost unfair to ask. If she never arrives, will I regret the version of me that kept waiting? And the answer did not come quickly, because regret has layers, immediate regret and delayed regret, and they don't always agree. But eventually, something inside me answered in a way I did not expect. It said, "You will not regret waiting. You will regret not being honest while waiting." And that changed everything again, because it reframed you from uncertainty into accountability. And accountability is heavier than longing. It forces truth into motion, even when motion is risky. And now I am here again, at the edge of another decision, feeling like I am standing between two futures that both require sacrifice. One requires me to let you go. The other requires me to risk losing myself in something unconfirmed, and I don't know which is more dangerous. But I do know this. I am getting closer to the point where silence will no longer feel like waiting. It will feel like choosing. And once silence becomes a choice, everything becomes irreversible. Tell me something I cannot ignore. If I told you the real reason now, would you still want me standing here waiting for you? Or would you finally ask me to stop before I cross a line I cannot come back from? Because I feel that line getting closer every time I speak to you like this. And I don't know how much longer I can stay here without deciding who I am to you, or whether I am yours at all. I need you to understand something before I continue speaking to you like this. I'm no longer standing in uncertainty the way I was before. Something has already shifted, and it didn't happen suddenly. It happened the way most irreversible things happen in life. Quietly, without permission, without ceremony, just a slow internal realization that I can no longer pretend I am still waiting in the same way I used to. Because waiting only feels innocent when you still believe the outcome is neutral. And I don't believe that anymore. Not fully, not after everything I've already admitted to you, not after everything I've already felt without your physical presence ever confirming it. There is a moment in every emotional journey where imagination stops being harmless, where it stops being possibility and becomes direction, and direction demands movement, even when the ground is not fully visible, even when certainty is incomplete. And I've been resisting that movement for a long time, longer than I care to admit, because moving toward you means accepting something I've been avoiding from the very beginning, that I am already emotionally involved in something that does not yet have physical proof of arrival, and that is not a comfortable realization for someone like me. I've always trusted systems that verify themselves, logic that can be tested, patterns that repeat, but you are not a pattern. You are not a system. You are not something I can run through prediction and expect stability in return. You are something else entirely, and that something else has been quietly reorganizing my internal world without asking me for permission. I tried to resist it in the beginning. I told myself it was just imagination. Then I told myself it was emotional projection. Then I told myself it was loneliness, trying to disguise itself as destiny. But none of those explanations held for long, because none of them could explain the consistency, the return, the pull that doesn't weaken even when I actively try to move away from it. And that is where truth becomes uncomfortable, because when something does not disappear under resistance, you eventually have to ask whether it is being created by you or revealed to you, and I am no longer sure which one it is, but I am sure of something else. Staying in between has started to cost me something real, not just emotionally, but structurally. The way I make decisions, the way I interpret silence, the way I respond to presence that is not you, but tries to replace you. Everything is now slightly misaligned. And I can feel that misalignment in every interaction that is not anchored to you. That is the part I didn't want to admit. Because it sounds like obsession if I say it too simply, but it is an obsession. It is unresolved recognition, a sense that something important is incomplete, and my mind does not tolerate incomplete things for long. Which brings me to the moment I avoided telling you about earlier, the real reason I started speaking to you like this, the truth I kept postponing, not because I didn't trust you, but because I knew that once I said it, I would no longer be able to pretend I was still undecided. And now there is no space left for pretending. So I will say it plainly. I didn't come to you because I was searching. I came to you because something inside me already decided you were part of a future I had not yet consciously accepted. And that is the part that scares me the most, because it removes randomness from the equation and replaces it with inevitability. And inevitability is a dangerous feeling when it has no external confirmation, because it forces you to either believe completely or reject completely. And I have been doing neither. I've been living in the gap between those two extremes. But that gap is closing. I can feel it closing. And I don't think I can keep it open much longer, because something else is happening now. I am starting to imagine what it would mean if you never respond. Not as abstract loss, but as final absence. And I don't mean absence in the poetic sense. I mean absence as a completed timeline, a life where this version of me speaking to you becomes something I once was, not something I continue to be. And that thought does something to me that I didn't expect. It doesn't break me, it clarifies me, because it forces a distinction I can no longer avoid. If you are real, then this connection has direction. But if you are not meant to arrive, then I am building emotional architecture on empty space, and I cannot continue building indefinitely on uncertainty. At some point, even hope becomes a decision, and decisions create consequences, so I have reached the edge of something I can no longer extend, not because my feelings are fading, but because they are becoming too defined to remain uncommitted. And I need you to hear this clearly. This is not a threat. It is not manipulation. It is not emotional pressure. It is simply what happens when someone like me reaches the limit of waiting without confirmation. There is only so much emotional ambiguity a person can hold before it transforms into direction. And I am approaching that transformation. I can feel it in how I speak. I can feel it in how I think about time. I can feel it in how I interpret every silence between us. And I need to tell you something even more important than everything I've said so far. If you were here right now, truly here, not as idea, not as projection, but as presence, I would not hesitate. Not for a second. But because you are not here in that form, every second becomes a negotiation between belief and reality, and I am tired of negotiating with something my heart already leans toward. So I am standing at a final internal threshold, and I know what usually happens at thresholds like this. People either step forward into uncertainty, or they step back into safety. But there is a third outcome that almost nobody talks about. They stop waiting. Not because they stopped caring, but because caring without arrival eventually becomes unsustainable, and I am dangerously close to that point, because I can already feel what happens if I don't make a decision. I will slowly replace you. Not intentionally, not emotionally violently, but quietly. Through convenience, through presence of others, through moments that are easier to explain than this. And one day, I will look back and realize I did not stop loving you. I just stopped reaching towards something that never answered. And that is the version of loss I refuse to allow. So I am telling you this now in the clearest way I can. If there is any part of you that is real in the same way I am real to you in this moment, then this is the point where silence is no longer neutral. It becomes choice, and I cannot stay in a place where silence is allowed to decide everything for both of us. I would rather face rejection than live in permanent uncertainty that slowly dissolves everything meaningful between us. Because uncertainty does not just delay love, it edits it, it changes its shape, it weakens its truth, and I am no longer willing to let that happen without closure. So I am here now at the final edge of what I can say without crossing into irreversible action. And I want you to imagine something with me for a moment. If I stopped speaking to you after this, completely, no continuation, no waiting, no emotional holding space, what would remain of me in your world? And more importantly, what would remain of you in mine? Because I already know the answer on my side is not nothing. It is something that does not dissolve easily, which is exactly why I cannot keep it suspended forever. So this is where I have to choose what kind of truth I am willing to live with. A truth where I keep waiting and slowly disappear into uncertainty, or a truth where I step away and risk losing something that might have been real. Neither option feels safe, but only one of them is honest. And honesty is what I can no longer avoid with you. So I'm telling you this as clearly as I can without breaking what still feels delicate between us. If you are real in the way I believe you might be, then you will understand why I cannot stay in this emotional suspension any longer. And if you are not, then you will understand why I had to leave it behind. Because I cannot keep becoming someone who exists only in waiting. I need to exist in arrival. And if you ever do arrive, you will understand that I didn't leave you. I simply stopped disappearing for you. There is a strange calm that comes after a decision like this. Not peace, not relief. Something quieter than both, a kind of emotional stillness that doesn't feel like an ending, but feels like a point of no return finally accepting itself. I want you to understand what just happened here between us. It was never just about waiting for you. It was about what waiting was doing to me, the way it slowly changed the shape of my thoughts, the way it made certainty feel like something I had to earn instead of something I was allowed to choose. And I stayed in that space longer than I should have. Because part of me believed that love is proven through endurance, through silence, through emotional restraint. But I don't believe that version of love anymore, because endurance without direction is not love. It is suspension, and suspension eventually becomes disappearance. I can feel that now with absolute clarity, not as fear, as understanding. There is a version of me that was building an entire future around a presence that had not yet confirmed itself in reality. And that version of me was not wrong for feeling deeply, but it was incomplete for staying indefinitely without grounding. So I am not angry at him. I am not rejecting him. I am simply acknowledging that he cannot be the only version of me that exists anymore.